3 bullets tore through his chest in a dark parking garage. No witnesses, no mercy. The shooter walked away without looking back. A professional, paid to kill the most powerful Navy SEAL commander in America. They dragged him into St. Catherine's Medical Center, Boston, bleeding out on a Tuesday morning. No ID, no name, just a dying man with a secret. A rookie nurse saved his life on the operating table. 10 minutes later, the hospital director fired her on the spot, ripped the badge right off her scrubs. Then 10 black SUVs surrounded the building. Armed men poured out, and they weren't there for the patient. They were there for her. Subscribe now, stay until the very end. Comment the city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story reaches. Sarah Colby had learned a long time ago that the best way to survive was to become invisible. She'd been at St. Catherine's Medical Center for exactly 21 days. 3 weeks of being called the new girl. 3 weeks of fetching instruments, mopping floors, and standing in the corner of operating rooms while surgeons who'd never seen a real battlefield told her she didn't belong. She could handle that. She'd handled worse. What she couldn't handle, what kept her awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment in Dorchester, was the silence. The terrible, suffocating silence of a life with no mission, no purpose, no unit counting on her to keep them alive. But that was the deal. Stay quiet, stay invisible, stay alive. The morning shift started at 6. Sarah was there at 5:30, the way she'd always been early for everything since her first day at Annapolis. She changed into her scrubs in the women's locker room, alone. She clipped her badge to her chest, S. Colby, RN, Trauma Unit, and she stared at it for a long moment. RN, registered nurse, not lieutenant commander, not chief surgical officer, forward operating base Cobra, Al-Tanf, Syria. Not the woman who'd earned the Navy Distinguished Service Medal for performing 62 surgeries in 72 hours during the worst mass casualty event of the Syrian campaign. Just a nurse, the new girl. She closed her locker and walked toward the trauma wing. Dr. Richard Graves was already holding court in the surgical break room when Sarah passed by. She heard his voice before she saw him, that deep, theatrical baritone he used when he wanted an audience. "I'm telling you, Kevin, the staffing office has completely lost its mind," Graves was saying. He was leaning against the counter, coffee in hand, his surgical cap already on, even though his first procedure wasn't for another hour. "They assigned the new girl to my OR again today, 3rd time this week." Dr. Kevin Liu, the second-year resident, laughed. "Which one? The quiet one who looks like she's about to cry every time someone raises their voice? That's the one, Colby. I asked HR where they found her, and you know what they told me? Transferred from a VA clinic in Virginia. A VA clinic, Kevin. She was probably handing out aspirin and scheduling appointments. And now she's supposed to assist in my trauma surgeries? Maybe she's a fast learner," Liu said, but the sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. "Fast learner," Graves snorted. "Last Tuesday, I asked her for a number 10 blade, and she had it in my hand before I finished the sentence. You know what that tells me? She's memorized the instrument tray. Textbook knowledge. Anyone can do that. But when the blood starts flying and the monitors start screaming, that's when you find out what someone's really made of. And I guarantee you, she's going to freeze." Sarah stood in the hallway just out of sight and listened to every word. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, hanging at her sides, didn't move, didn't tremble, didn't clench. Those hands had held a sergeant's severed femoral artery closed for 47 minutes inside a Black Hawk helicopter flying at 160 knots through enemy airspace over Mosul. Those hands had performed an emergency cricothyrotomy on a 19-year-old Marine with a crushed larynx, using nothing but a pocket knife and a ballpoint pen tube, while mortar rounds impacted 50 meters from the field tent. Those hands had saved 214 lives. But Dr. Richard Graves didn't know that, and Sarah intended to keep it that way. She walked into the break room. Both men looked up. Graves didn't bother hiding his expression. That particular blend of dismissal and irritation he reserved specifically for her. "Colby, you're in OR3 with me today. Try to keep up." "Yes, doctor," Sarah said. Nothing more. She poured herself a cup of coffee, turned, and left. Behind her, she heard Lou mutter something and Graves chuckle. She didn't look back. At 7:15, Sarah was standing in her designated position in OR3, secondary surgical assist, the lowest rung on the ladder, when the first patient of the day was wheeled in. A 53-year-old construction worker with a compound fracture of the tibia. Routine. Graves handled it with his usual precision, narrating every move to Lou like he was filming a training video. Sarah handed instruments. She anticipated requests. She moved with a quiet efficiency that anyone paying real attention would have recognized as something far beyond nursing school training. Nobody was paying real attention. At 9:40, the second case came in. A car accident victim, lacerations to the abdomen. Again, Graves performed. Again, Sarah assisted. Again, she was invisible. It was 10:17 when everything changed. Sarah heard it before anyone else. The particular urgency in the overhead page that told her, before the words even registered, that something catastrophic had just walked through the emergency room doors. "Trauma Team Alpha to ER Bay 1. Trauma Team Alpha to ER Bay 1. Multiple gunshot wounds, patient critical." Graves was already stripping off his gloves from the previous case. "Let's go, people. Move." They converged on ER Bay 1 in under 90 seconds. The paramedics were already transferring the patient, a large man, mid-50s, unconscious, drenched in blood. 3 entry wounds visible, 2 in the upper chest, 1 in the lower abdomen. Male, approximately 55 to 60 years of age, found by a hotel security guard in the parking structure of the Meridian Hotel downtown. The lead paramedic rattled off. No ID on the patient, no wallet, no phone. 3 gunshot wounds, high caliber, close range. GCS was 6 in the field, intubated on scene. He's lost a lot of blood. "Close range," Graves repeated, snapping on fresh gloves. "Someone wanted this man dead." "Someone almost got their wish," the paramedic said. "We almost lost him twice on the ride over." The team moved the patient onto the surgical table. Nurses cut away the remaining clothing. The cardiac monitor was connected. An IV line was established. Blood was being typed. Sarah was doing what she always did, preparing the instrument tray, staying out of the way, being invisible. Her hands moved on autopilot while the chaos swirled around her. Then she saw it. As the nurses cut away the man's blood-soaked shirt, something fell against his chest. A chain. A small metal tag on the chain, battered and scratched. The kind of tag that doesn't come from any civilian jewelry store. Military dog tags. Sarah's hands stopped moving. Something cold and electric shot through her body. She leaned closer. The tag had flipped face up against the man's collarbone, and the name stamped into the metal was visible for just a moment before a nurse's hand moved across it. But a moment was enough. Harding, James R., Vice Admiral, USN, blood type, O pos. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed the edge of the instrument tray to steady herself. James Harding. Vice Admiral James Harding. Every person who had ever served in naval special warfare knew that name. Every combat medic, every field surgeon, every operator who'd ever gone downrange in the last 20 years knew that name. Harding was the architect of some of the most critical special operations in modern American military history. He'd commanded SEAL teams through 3 wars. He was a living legend, the kind of man whose classified service record was thicker than most people's entire career files. And someone had just put 3 bullets in him in a hotel parking garage in Boston. Sarah looked around the room. Nobody else had noticed the tags. Nobody else knew who was lying on that table. To them, this was just another John Doe gunshot victim, critical but anonymous. Her mind was racing. Why was a vice admiral in Boston with no security detail? Why was he carrying no identification? Why would someone this important be alone in a parking garage? Something was very, very wrong. But she couldn't say anything. She couldn't reveal that she'd read the tags. She couldn't reveal that she knew who this man was. Because revealing that would mean revealing how she knew, and that would mean revealing who she was. And that was the one thing she could never do. Graves was barking orders. All right, let's get him typed and crossed for 6 units. I want a chest x-ray and a fast scan now. Lou, you're on suction. Colby, instrument tray. Stay sharp. Yes, doctor. Sarah took her position. But now, instead of the passive, invisible nurse, something else was alive inside her. The battlefield surgeon, the officer, the part of her that had saved 214 lives was assessing, calculating, reading the wounds with an expertise that nobody in this room possessed. She could see things Graves couldn't see. The angle of the entry wounds, steep, downward trajectory, which meant the shooter was above the victim, likely on a parking structure ramp. The tight grouping, 2 chest shots within 3 inches of each other, which meant a trained marksman, not a panicked mugger. The caliber of the wounds, large, devastating, consistent with .45 ACP or similar military-grade ammunition. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random violence. This was a professional hit. And the target was one of the most important military officers in the United States. Graves made his first incision at 10:31. Within seconds, the monitors erupted. BP dropping, 80/50 and falling, the anesthesiologist called out. I see it, Graves muttered, his hands working inside the chest cavity. There's a bleeder in here somewhere. Suction, Lou, more suction, I can't see a damn thing. Lou moved in with the suction catheter, but the blood was coming faster than he could clear it. The chest cavity was filling up. Graves's fingers probed, searched, clamped, and missed. Where the hell is this coming from? Graves said, louder now. His voice had lost its theatrical confidence. This was real. This was a man dying under his hands, and he couldn't find the source. BP 60/35, the anesthesiologist said. Heart rate 140. Doctor, we're losing him. Sarah watched Graves's hands. She watched where he was searching, and she knew, with the absolute certainty of someone who treated hundreds of gunshot wounds from this exact type of ammunition, that he was looking in the wrong place. The bullets had fragmented on impact. The primary bleeding wasn't coming from the obvious entry wounds. It was coming from the secondary damage, bone fragments from shattered ribs acting as internal projectiles, tearing through intercostal arteries deep in the posterior chest wall. It was a pattern she'd seen over and over in Iraq and Syria. Civilian surgeons almost never encountered it. Battlefield surgeons knew it by heart. She had to say something. If she didn't, this man was going to die on the table. The most important SEAL commander in America was going to bleed to death because a civilian surgeon was following a textbook written for a world that didn't include military-grade ammunition. Dr. Graves, she kept her voice low, controlled. The voice she used when everything was falling apart and calm was the only weapon she had left. The bleeding may be posterior, intercostal arteries. The fragmentation pattern from high-velocity rounds creates secondary projectiles from bone shards. The bleeders won't be where you'd expect them in a standard gunshot case. The room went still. Graves looked up from the open chest. His eyes, above his surgical mask, locked onto Sarah's with an expression of pure, undiluted fury. Excuse me? The posterior intercostal arteries, sir. If the rounds fragmented, I heard what you said, Colby. His voice was ice. What I'm trying to understand is why a nurse with 3 weeks of experience in my department thinks she can tell me, a board-certified trauma surgeon with 25 years of practice, where to look for a bleeder inside my patient's chest. Sir, I've seen this wound pattern before. If we don't, you've seen this wound pattern before? Graves's voice rose. Where? At the VA clinic where you were handing out Band-Aids? Step back from this table right now. That is an order. BP 50 over 25, the anesthesiologist said. His voice was shaking now. Dr. Graves, we have maybe 2 minutes. Sarah stepped back. She stood there 3 feet from the table, watching James Harding die, watching his blood pressure numbers cascade downward on the monitor, watching Graves's hands become more frantic, more desperate, searching in all the wrong places. 1 minute, 40 seconds. 1 minute, 20. And then Admiral Harding's eyes open. It shouldn't have been possible. The level of blood loss, the anesthesia, a conscious patient at this stage was a medical impossibility. But James Harding had not become the most legendary SEAL commander in modern history by submitting to what was possible. His eyes were wild, unfocused, the eyes of a man fighting through agony that would have rendered most people catatonic. They swept the room, assessing, searching, the way a combat operator assesses a room for threats and allies. They found Sarah, and they stopped. Recognition, instant, absolute, like a signal flare cutting through fog. His right hand, the hand that had signed orders sending thousands of special operators into combat, shot upward and seized Sarah's wrist. His grip was iron, impossible strength from a man who was bleeding to death. Everyone in the room froze. Through the intubation tube, through the blood, through the agony, Admiral James Harding forced out words that no one in that operating room would ever forget. Colby, a rasp, a command. Lieutenant Commander, Colby. Graves's eyes went wide. Lou dropped the suction catheter. The anesthesiologist's hand froze on the dial. She's one of ours. Harding's grip tightened on Sarah's wrist. His eyes burned into hers with a desperate, furious intensity. Let her work. That's an order. His hand fell. His eyes closed. The monitor screamed. BP 40 over 15, the anesthesiologist whispered. He's coding. Sarah looked at Graves. Graves looked at Sarah. 25 years of surgical experience stared across the table at 8 years of battlefield hell, and 25 years blinked first. What do you need? Graves said. Sarah was already moving. Thoracotomy tray, 8 units of O negative, stat. Someone call the blood bank and tell them I need 12 more units on standby. I need a second suction setup and a vascular clamp set. Move. Now. We have less than 90 seconds. Nobody questioned her. Nobody hesitated. The entire surgical team, the same people who had mocked her, dismissed her, treated her like she was nothing, moved with a precision and urgency they had never shown before. Because they had just heard a dying man call her by rank, and the look in his eyes when he saw her was not the look of a patient recognizing a nurse. It was the look of a warrior recognizing the one person who could save him. Sarah's hands entered the chest cavity, and everything else disappeared. The mockery disappeared. The 3 weeks of humiliation disappeared. The 2 years of exile, the sealed discharge, the stolen career, all of it vanished. There was only the patient, only the bleeding, only the mission. Her fingers found the first bleeder in 11 seconds. A shredded intercostal artery behind a jagged fragment of the 4th rib, exactly where she'd told Graves it would be. She clamped it. Blood flow reduced, but not enough. There's a second one, she said. Deeper, posterior wall. Her hand went deeper into the chest. Liu, now holding the retractor with hands that trembled far more than hers ever had, watched her work with an expression that would stay on his face for the rest of his career. Got it. She clamped the second artery, and there's bone fragment pressing against the pericardium. If that shifts, it'll puncture the heart. I need forceps, the long ones. Now. Graves handed her the forceps himself. His hands were steady. His eyes were locked on her technique. He was watching a master at work, and he knew it. Sarah extracted the bone fragment, a razor-sharp shard of rib no bigger than a thumbnail, and held it up in the forceps. 1 centimeter from the pericardial wall. 1 centimeter from killing Admiral James Harding. BP stabilizing, the anesthesiologist said, and the relief in his voice was so thick it was almost a sob. 60/40, 70, 80. He's coming back. Sarah kept working. There was more damage. A small laceration to the left lung, a nicked thoracic duct, tissue damage from the cavitation effect of the fragmenting rounds. She repaired each one with a speed and precision that left the entire room speechless. 110/70, the anesthesiologist said. Heart rate normalizing. He's stable. Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 single second. In that second, she wasn't in Boston. She was in a field tent in Altamf, and the man on the table was a 22-year-old corporal named Davis, who'd taken shrapnel from an IED, and she'd saved him too. She opened her eyes. She finished the repair. She closed the incision. 3 hours and 42 minutes. That's how long the surgery took. When it was over, Admiral James Harding's vital signs were stable. His bleeding was controlled, and he was going to live. The OR was silent. Not the hostile silence of the morning, when they'd mocked her behind her back. This was a different silence. The silence of people who had just witnessed something they didn't have words for. Dr. Liu was standing against the wall. His surgical mask was pulled down. There were tears on his face. He didn't bother wiping them. Graves stood across the table from Sarah. He pulled off his gloves slowly. His face was unreadable. Dr. Colby, he said quietly. Not Colby, not the new girl, doctor. I owe you an apology. Sarah pulled off her own gloves. You don't owe me anything, Dr. Graves. We all want the same thing. No, Graves said. I owe you more than an apology. I owe that man his life. Because if you hadn't been in this room today, he would be dead. And it would have been my fault. Sarah looked at him. For a moment, the exhaustion of the last 2 years, the discharge, the exile, the loneliness, the silence, flickered across her face. Then it was gone. He's alive, she said. That's all that matters. She turned to leave the OR. She needed air. She needed 5 minutes alone to process what had just happened. Not just the surgery, but the fact that James Harding had recognized her. That he'd called her by rank. That he knew her name. Which meant someone in Naval Special Warfare Command still knew she existed. And that changed everything. She pushed through the OR doors into the corridor. Director Helen Marsh was standing there, flanked by 2 hospital security officers and the head of the legal department. Marsh's face was stone. Ms. Colby, she said, not doctor, not nurse, Ms. My office, now. Sarah followed Marsh down the corridor. The 2 security officers walked behind her, close enough that she could hear their breathing. The legal department head, a thin man named Pearson with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that had never smiled, walked beside Marsh, clutching a manila folder against his chest like a shield. Nobody spoke. Nurses in the hallway stopped and stared. A resident carrying a stack of charts pressed himself against the wall to let them pass. Sarah recognized the look on their faces. She'd seen it before, on the faces of soldiers watching a fellow officer get escorted to a disciplinary hearing. Pity mixed with relief that it wasn't them. Marsh's office was on the 3rd floor. She held the door open, waited for Sarah and Pearson to enter, then closed it behind them. The security officers remained outside. Marsh didn't sit down. She didn't invite Sarah to sit down either. Do you know why you're here, Miss Colby? Sarah stood at attention without meaning to. 8 years of military discipline had wired that posture into her bones. I have an idea. Then let me make it perfectly clear. Marsh opened the manila folder and spread its contents across her desk. Employment forms, Sarah's hiring paperwork, her nursing credentials. You were hired at St. Catherine's Medical Center as a registered nurse. Your employment file lists nursing qualifications from an accredited program in Virginia. There is no surgical license on file. There is no physician credential on file. There is no authorization, none whatsoever, for you to perform surgery in this hospital. The patient was dying, Director Marsh. The patient is not your concern, Marsh's voice cut like a blade. What is my concern is the fact that an unlicensed individual just performed a 3-hour thoracic surgery in my operating room. Do you have any idea what that means for this hospital? The liability alone could shut us down. The state medical board could pull our accreditation. We could face criminal charges. Pearson stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. Ms. Colby, under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 112, practicing medicine without a valid license is a felony offense. The hospital is legally obligated to report this incident. Sarah's stomach dropped. A felony? They weren't just firing her, they were threatening to put her in prison. I saved a man's life, Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but something cracked underneath it. He was dying. Dr. Graves couldn't locate the bleeders. I could. If I hadn't stepped in, that patient would be in the morgue right now. That may be true, Marsh said, and that is irrelevant. You were not authorized to perform that surgery, period. She pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder and placed it on the desk. This is your termination notice, effective immediately. You are to surrender your hospital badge, your access card, and any hospital property in your possession. Security will escort you to the locker room to collect your personal belongings, and then they will escort you off the premises. You are not to return to this hospital for any reason. Is that understood? Sarah stared at the termination letter, black ink on white paper. Her name printed in a cold, bureaucratic font, just like the discharge papers 2 years ago. Different letterhead, same feeling. The same sensation of having the ground pulled out from under her feet while she was still standing. Director Marsh, Sarah said quietly, that patient in recovery right now, do you even know who he is? Marsh frowned. He's a John Doe. No identification was found on him. He's not a John Doe. Ms. Colby, this conversation is over. Your badge, please. Sarah unclipped the badge from her scrubs. She held it for a moment. 21 days. That's all she'd had. 21 days of pretending she could build a normal life. 21 days of believing she could start over. She placed the badge on the desk. I'll need your access card as well, Pearson said. Sarah pulled the card from her pocket and set it next to the badge. 2 small pieces of plastic. Her entire identity at St. Catherine's reduced to objects on a desk. Marsh picked up her phone. Send security to escort Ms. Colby to the staff locker room, then to the front exit. Sarah turned toward the door. She stopped. You're making a mistake, Director. Not about firing me, about that patient. You need to find out who he is, and you need to do it before whoever shot him finds out where he is. Marsh didn't respond. Pearson was already typing something on his phone, probably an email to the legal team. Sarah walked out. The security officers flanked her again. She walked back down the corridor she'd traveled 1,000 times in 3 weeks, past the nurses' station where she charted vitals at 6 in the morning, past the break room where Graves and Lou had laughed about her, past OR3 where she just performed the surgery of her life. Dr. Graves was standing outside the OR. He saw her coming with a security escort, and his face changed. He stepped forward, blocking the corridor. What the hell is this? He said, looking at the security officers. Step aside, Dr. Graves, one of the officers said. Hospital administration matter. Are you firing her? Graves looked incredulous. She just saved a man's life in there. I watched her do something I couldn't do. Are you seriously firing her? Dr. Graves, this isn't your concern, the officer said. It is my concern. That was my patient and my operating room. If anyone should be answering questions about what happened in there, it's me. I'm the one who asked her to take over. That's not what happened, and we both know it, Sarah said softly. Graves looked at her. Something shifted behind his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or the beginning of respect that had come too late to matter. Martinez, Colby, whatever your name is, I'm going to talk to Marsh about this. This isn't right. Don't, Sarah said. You'll make it worse. Take care of the patient, doctor. Graves, that's all that matters now. She walked past him. She didn't look back. In the locker room, Sarah changed out of her scrubs. She put on the jeans, the gray sweater, the worn leather jacket she'd owned since her first deployment. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. 31 years old, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a knot. She looked exactly like what she was, a soldier with nowhere left to fight. She closed the locker for the last time and followed security to the front entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the November air hit her face. Cold, sharp, the kind of cold that wakes you up when you'd rather stay numb. She stepped onto the sidewalk and heard the doors close behind her. She stood there. No badge, no job, no plan. The quiet life she'd built, the invisible, anonymous existence that was supposed to keep her safe, had just been ripped apart in a single morning. And then she heard it. Engines. Not one engine, not two. The deep, synchronized rumble of a convoy, a sound she hadn't heard since her last deployment, when military vehicle columns rolled through base camps at dawn. She turned toward the hospital's main entrance road. 10 black Chevrolet Suburbans, government plates, tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. They moved in a tight, disciplined formation, 2 lead vehicles, 6 in the center, 2 trailing, the kind of convoy that doesn't stop for red lights and doesn't answer to local police. They pulled into the hospital's entrance one after another, engines idling, forming a perimeter that sealed off the main entrance completely. 2 vehicles swung around to the emergency room entrance. One positioned itself at the parking structure exit. The doors opened simultaneously. Armed men stepped out, not police officers, not FBI agents. Sarah recognized the type immediately. Short haircuts, dark suits, earpieces, compact weapons concealed under jackets, but visible to anyone who knew where to look. Their movements were coordinated, precise, the kind of tactical deployment that takes years of specialized training. These were military intelligence operators, Tier 1 security, the kind of people who protect assets so valuable that their very existence is classified. They secured the hospital entrance in under 45 seconds. Nobody went in, nobody came out. Hospital staff who tried to exit were politely but firmly turned back inside. Sarah stood on the sidewalk and watched. Her heart was hammering, but her body was still. Perfectly still. The way a soldier gets still when they know something dangerous is about to happen, and they need every sense operating at maximum capacity. A man stepped out of the lead Suburban. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with a lean build and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a Navy dress uniform with the rank insignia of a full commander. 3 rows of ribbons on his chest, including one that Sarah recognized from across the parking lot, the Navy Cross. He scanned the area with trained eyes, found Sarah on the sidewalk, and walked directly toward her. He didn't hurry. He didn't hesitate. He walked with the steady, deliberate stride of a man who had known exactly where she would be standing before he arrived. He stopped 3 feet in front of her. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Colby," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact, spoken with the quiet authority of a man who had her entire classified service record memorized. Sarah met his eyes. "I haven't been called that in 2 years." "I know." He reached into his jacket and produced a military ID. "Commander Ethan Cole, Naval Special Warfare Command, Intelligence Division. Warcom Intelligence." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're not here because of the surgery." "No, ma'am, I'm not." "You're here because of the Admiral." Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Confirmation. "You recognized him." "I read his dog tags during the trauma assessment. James Harding, Vice Admiral, United States Navy, the most decorated SEAL commander alive. Sarah paused, which raises a question, Commander. Why was a Vice Admiral with no security detail, no identification, and no backup shot 3 times in a parking garage in downtown Boston? That's exactly what I need to talk to you about, Lieutenant Commander. I'm not a Lieutenant Commander anymore. I was discharged. You know that. I know everything about your discharge, ma'am. I know who ordered it. I know why. And I know it was illegal. Cole held her gaze. I also know that the people who arranged your discharge are the same people who put those bullets in Admiral Harding this morning. The world tilted. Sarah felt it. That sickening, vertiginous sensation of a truth she'd suspected but never dared to confirm, suddenly becoming real. She'd spent 2 years telling herself that her discharge was just bureaucratic retaliation, career politics, a powerful officer punishing her for insubordination. But it wasn't. It had never been just about her. Get in the vehicle, Lieutenant Commander, Cole said. I'll explain everything, but we need to move. The people who did this know the Admiral survived. They know which hospital he's in, and they're going to try to finish the job. Sarah didn't move. How did you know I was here, at this hospital, at this exact moment? Cole almost smiled. Almost. We didn't. Admiral Harding came to Boston to find you. He'd been tracking your location for 3 months. He knew you were working at St. Catherine's under your real name. He was looking for me? You're the reason he was in Boston, Lieutenant Commander, and the people who shot him knew that too. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her again. Harding hadn't just happened at her hospital. He'd come to Boston specifically because she was here, and someone had shot him to prevent whatever he was coming to tell her. What did he want from me? Your testimony, your documentation, the evidence you filed 2 years ago in Syria, the report that got you discharged. Cole's voice dropped. You filed a report documenting that 3 American soldiers died because of defective equipment supplied by a military contractor called Trident Solutions. You refused to falsify their cause of death. For that, they destroyed your career. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. Corporal Davis, Specialist Reeves, Sergeant First Class Amy Okafor. She remembered every name, every face, every detail of how they died, not from enemy fire, but from body armor that failed, from medical supplies that were contaminated, from vehicle systems that malfunctioned because a defense contractor cut corners to increase profit margins. I remember, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Admiral Harding found your original report buried in classified files 6 months ago. Your documentation, the autopsies, the equipment analysis, the photographs, is the key evidence in a federal investigation that could bring down Trident Solutions and every Pentagon official protecting them. Cole paused. The Admiral was building a case. Your report was the foundation. He came to Boston to ask you to testify. And Trident found out. Trident found out. They sent a contractor named Marcus Webb, former Special Forces, now working as Trident's cleanup operative, to eliminate the Admiral before he could reach you. Sarah looked back at the hospital. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, Admiral James Harding was lying in a recovery bed, alive because she'd refused to be invisible for 1 more minute. And somewhere out there, the man who'd tried to kill him was still free. Webb, she said, is he still in Boston? We believe so, which is why we need to secure this hospital immediately and get both you and the Admiral to a safe location. You're not moving the Admiral. He's 12 hours out of a major thoracic surgery. Moving him could kill him. Then we secure the hospital. But I need you inside, Lieutenant Commander, not as a nurse, as the Admiral's surgeon and as a material witness in a federal investigation. Sarah laughed. It came out sharp and bitter. I just got fired from this hospital 10 minutes ago. Security escorted me out the door. The director threatened me with felony charges for practicing medicine without a license. I'm aware. Cole reached into his vehicle and produced a second document. heavy paper, official letterhead, stamped with the seal of the United States Navy. This is a federal order signed by the Secretary of the Navy, reactivating your commission effective immediately. As of right now, you are Lieutenant Commander Sarah Colby, United States Navy, on active duty and assigned to the medical care of Vice Admiral James Harding. No hospital administrator, no state medical board, and no local law enforcement has jurisdiction over your activities while you are operating under federal military authority. Sarah stared at the document, her name, her rank, her service number, all of it restored with a single signature. 2 years, 2 years of exile, 2 years of being nobody. And now in the space of a single morning, she'd gone from invisible nurse to fired employee to reactivated Navy officer. "This is real," she said. "This is real, and I need your answer now, Lieutenant Commander. Will you come back inside?" Sarah looked at the hospital doors, the same doors she'd walked through 21 days ago as a nobody, the same doors she'd been escorted through 10 minutes ago as a disgrace. She was about to walk through them again as something else entirely. "One condition," she said. "Name it. When this is over, when Harding is safe and Trident is exposed, I want the records of every soldier who died because of their negligence made public. Every name, every face. The families deserve to know the truth about how their people died." Cole nodded slowly. "The Admiral said you'd say that. He said those would be your exact words." "Did he?" "He also said to tell you something in case you needed convincing." Cole paused. He said, "Tell Colby that Corporal Davis's mother still writes letters to her son's old unit every Christmas. She still doesn't know why her boy really died. It's time she found out." Sarah closed her eyes. 22 years old, Michael Davis, from Beaumont, Texas, died on a Tuesday, just like today. Died because his body armor, manufactured by Trident Solutions under a $2 billion Pentagon contract, had a defective ceramic plate that shattered on the first-round impact instead of absorbing it. She'd held him while he bled out. She'd written the real cause of death in her report, and they'd buried it. They'd buried her. Not anymore. Sarah opened her eyes. "Let's go." Cole walked beside her toward the hospital entrance. The armed operatives parted to let them through. Hospital staff pressed against the lobby walls, stared as a woman who'd been escorted out in disgrace 10 minutes ago walked back in flanked by military intelligence. At the reception desk, a nurse Sarah recognized, a kind woman named Gloria, who'd been one of the few people to treat her decently, watched with wide eyes. "Sarah? What's going on?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Cole led her to the elevator. They rode to the 3rd floor in silence. When the doors opened, Director Helen Marsh was standing in the corridor, her face white, her phone pressed to her ear. She saw Sarah and her mouth fell open. "What? Security? This woman was terminated. She is not authorized to be in this building. I want her removed immediately." Cole stepped forward and handed Marsh the federal order. "Director Marsh, I'm Commander Ethan Cole, United States Navy. This document, signed by the Secretary of the Navy, reactivates Lieutenant Commander Colby's military commission and places her in charge of the medical care of the patient currently in your recovery ward. The patient is a senior military officer under federal protection. This hospital is now under the jurisdiction of Naval Special Warfare Command for the duration of his care." Marsh read the document. The color drained from her face in stages, like watching a tide pull back from shore. "The patient," she said slowly, "the John Doe from this morning, he's military? He is a Vice Admiral of the United States Navy, and his identity is classified. You will not discuss him with any staff member who is not directly involved in his care. You will not contact law enforcement. You will not contact the media. Any violation of these instructions will be treated as a breach of national security." Marsh looked from the document to Cole, to Sarah, the woman she'd fired, the woman she'd threatened with felony charges, The woman who was now standing in her hospital corridor, wearing the invisible weight of a military rank that outstripped Marsh's authority in every conceivable way. "Miss Colby," Marsh began. "Lieutenant Commander Colby," Cole corrected. Marsh swallowed. "Lieutenant Commander Colby, the hospital will cooperate fully." Sarah looked at her. She could have said 100 things. She could have thrown Marsh's words back in her face. She could have made her feel exactly the way Sarah had felt standing in that office 30 minutes ago. She didn't. "Thank you, Director. I'll need full access to the patient's room, his medical records, and a dedicated surgical team on standby. Dr. Graves and Dr. Liu, specifically. They assisted in the original surgery, and they know the case." "Of course, whatever you need." Sarah walked past her toward the recovery ward. Cole fell into step beside her. "That was generous of you," he said quietly. Most people would have made her squirm. "I'm not here for her," Sarah said. "I'm here for him." She pushed open the door to the recovery room. Admiral James Harding lay in the bed, connected to monitors, IV lines running into both arms, a chest tube draining fluid from his surgical site. His face was pale. His breathing was shallow but steady. He was alive. Because of her. And somewhere in Boston, a man named Marcus Webb was planning to change that. Sarah pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. She checked his vitals. She reviewed the post-surgical notes on the chart. She placed 2 fingers on his wrist and felt his pulse. Strong, regular, the pulse of a man who had survived worse than this and would survive this too. Then she leaned close and spoke quietly, even though he couldn't hear her. "I don't know why you came looking for me, Admiral, but I'm here now, and nobody is getting through that door." Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out. A text from an unknown number. 4 words. "We know he's alive." Sarah stared at the screen. Her pulse spiked. She looked up at the window, at the gray Boston sky, at the city sprawling out in every direction with a million places to hide. Marcus Webb wasn't just still in Boston. He was watching. Sarah showed the text to Cole within seconds. He read the 4 words, and his jaw tightened so hard she could hear his teeth grind. He pulled his own phone and dialed without hesitation. "This is Cole. The hospital is compromised. Someone has eyes on the patient's status. I need a full electronic sweep of this floor in the next 15 minutes and a trace on an incoming text." He read off Sarah's phone number. "Lock this building down. Nobody in or out without military clearance. Move." He hung up and looked at Sarah. "Who else has your number?" "Almost nobody. The hospital HR department, my landlord, a grocery delivery service." She paused. "That's it. I've been living like a ghost for 2 years, Commander. This number is practically untraceable." Practically isn't good enough against Trident. They have access to military-grade surveillance systems. If they know your phone number, they may already know your address, your daily routine, and every exit in this building. Cole turned to the 2 operatives standing outside Harding's door. "Nobody enters this room without my direct authorization. Not doctors, not nurses, not the hospital director herself. If someone approaches without clearance, you detain them. Understood?" Both men nodded. Sarah looked back at the Admiral. His monitors beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell with the mechanical rhythm of a man whose body was fighting to heal. 12 hours post-surgery, the most critical window. If Webb was going to make a second attempt, this was the time to do it, while the patient was immobile, drugged, and defenseless. "We need to move him," Cole said. "I already told you moving him could kill him. The chest tube is draining active fluid. His blood pressure is stabilized but fragile. One bad transfer and he codes in the back of your Suburban. And if Webb gets inside this hospital, the Admiral dies anyway, along with anyone standing between Webb and that bed." Sarah stared at Cole. He was right, and she knew it. But the surgeon in her wouldn't yield. "Give me 48 hours. 48 hours and I can get him stable enough for transport. Until then, we fortify this room and we don't let anyone near him." 48 hours is a long time when a professional killer is watching this building. Then make sure your men are better than he is. Cole held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. 48 hours, not a minute more. He left to coordinate the security operation. Sarah was alone with the Admiral. She pulled the chair closer to his bed and sat down. The monitors beeped. The chest tube bubbled quietly. Outside the door, 2 armed men stood guard over the most important patient in the country. And somewhere in Boston, a killer was waiting. Sarah pulled out her phone and deleted the text. Then she powered the phone off completely, removed the SIM card, and dropped both pieces into the biohazard disposal bin by the door. If Trident was tracking the signal, they just lost it. 11:42 p.m. Sarah had been awake for 18 hours. The adrenaline from the surgery and the firing and Cole's arrival was beginning to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that pressed against the back of her eyes. But she couldn't sleep. Not now. Not with that text still burning in her mind. She reviewed Harding's post-op vitals methodically. Blood pressure holding at 108/65. Heart rate 72. Oxygen saturation 96%. Chest tube output decreasing, which meant the internal bleeding was slowing. Good signs. All of them good. But something else was bothering her. Something clinical. She pulled up his lab results on the bedside monitor and scrolled through them slowly. Blood chemistry, coagulation panel, CBC, metabolic panel. She stopped. His white blood cell count was elevated, significantly elevated. Not the kind of elevation you'd expect from surgical trauma and acute blood loss. This was different. This was chronic. She scrolled further. Liver enzymes, elevated. Alkaline phosphatase, elevated. Albumin, low. Sarah sat back in her chair. Her medical training connected the dots before her conscious mind wanted to accept them. These weren't post-surgical findings. These were pre-existing. Admiral Harding had been sick before he was shot. She needed his full medical history, but his records were classified. She needed to talk to his personal physician, but she didn't know who that was. She needed answers, and the only person who could give them to her was unconscious in the bed in front of her. At 12:15 a.m., a knock on the door. One of the guards opened it after checking credentials. Doctor. Graves walked in, still in his scrubs, his face drawn and tired. They told me you were back, he said quietly. Commander Cole gave me clearance. I'm on the approved medical team. Thank you for coming, Dr. Graves. Richard. He pulled up a second chair and sat down beside her. After today, I think you've earned the right to call me Richard. Sarah almost smiled. Almost. Richard, I need to ask you something. Did you notice anything unusual in the patient's blood work during the surgery? I was a little busy trying not to watch a man die on my table, so no. He paused. What did you find? Elevated WBC, liver enzymes through the roof, low albumin. She turned the monitor toward him. This man was sick before the bullets hit him. Graves studied the numbers. His expression changed. The surgeon in him was reading the same story she'd read. These look like markers for... Don't say it yet. I don't want to speculate without a full workup. Sarah, these numbers are consistent with late-stage hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah closed her eyes. Admiral James Harding, the man who'd survived 3 wars, who'd commanded the most elite special operations forces in the world, who'd taken 3 bullets and refused to die on the table, might be fighting something that no surgeon could cut out. We need a full oncology panel, she said. CT of the abdomen, tumor markers, AFP levels. Can you order that without going through Marsh? I can order whatever I want. I'm the chief of trauma surgery. Graves paused. Does Commander Cole know about this? No, and he doesn't need to know until we have confirmed results. This is medical information, not intelligence. Graves nodded. He stood to leave, then turned back. Sarah, What you did in that OR today? I've been a surgeon for 25 years. I trained at Johns Hopkins. I've operated on senators, athletes, CEOs. I have never, in my entire career, seen anyone do what you did. His voice roughened. And I've never been more ashamed of the way I treated someone. I am sorry, truly. You're here now, Sarah said. That's what counts. He left. The door closed. Sarah was alone again with the Admiral, and the steady pulse of his monitors, and a new fear growing in her chest that had nothing to do with assassins or conspiracies. At 2:17 a.m., Admiral Harding's eyes opened. Not the violent, desperate awakening of the operating room. This was slow, gradual, the careful, measured consciousness of a man surfacing from deep water. His eyes moved first, scanning the room, cataloging the monitors, the IV lines, the chest tube, the armed guard visible through the glass panel in the door. Then they found Sarah. "Colby," he said. His voice was a ruined whisper, scraped raw by the intubation tube and hours of unconsciousness. But underneath the damage, the authority was still there. The voice of a man who'd given orders that changed the course of wars. Sarah leaned forward. "Don't try to talk too much, Admiral. You're 12 hours post-op from a major thoracic surgery. 3 bullet wounds. I repaired 2 intercostal arteries, removed bone fragments from your chest cavity, and patched a laceration to your left lung. You lost 4 liters of blood." Harding processed this with the calm detachment of a man who'd received battle damage reports on himself before. "The surgery, you performed it." "Yes, sir." "They tried to assign a civilian surgeon. Dr. Graves is excellent at what he does, but the wound pattern was military grade. He didn't recognize the fragmentation trauma." "But you did?" "I've seen it too many times to miss it, sir." Harding's hand moved. Slowly, painfully, he reached out and grasped her forearm. Not with the desperate, dying grip of the operating room. This was deliberate. This was one warrior acknowledging another. "I came to Boston to find you, Colby. Commander Cole told me. He told me about the investigation, about Trident." "Cole told you what Cole knows." Harding's eyes sharpened. Even drugged, even broken, those eyes missed nothing. "Cole doesn't know everything." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. "What doesn't he know, sir?" Harding was quiet for a moment. His breathing was labored. Every word cost him something. But he spoke anyway, because what he had to say was worth the price. "Trident Solutions has a man inside Warcom. High level. Someone with access to classified operations, personnel files, and intelligence briefings. Someone who knew exactly when and where I'd be in Boston." He paused to breathe. "Someone who also knew where you were, Colby. Your address, your hospital, your shift schedule. That text you received tonight didn't come from Marcus Webb." Sarah's blood went cold. "How do you know about the text?" "Because I've been monitoring Trident's communications for 6 months. They've been tracking you since the day you were discharged. They've always known where you were. They let you think you were invisible because it suited them. As long as you stayed quiet, you weren't a threat. And then you came looking for me. And then I came looking for you. And suddenly you became a threat again." Sarah stood up. Her mind was racing now, processing the implications at combat speed. If Trident had someone inside Naval Special Warfare Command, inside Cole's own intelligence division, then the security perimeter around this hospital wasn't protection. It was a cage. "Admiral, the men outside this door, Cole's operatives, can we trust them?" "You can trust Cole. He's clean. I vetted him personally." Harding's voice was fading, his body pulling him back toward unconsciousness. "But his team was assembled through Warcom channel. If the mole has access to those channels, he knows who Cole brought, where they're positioned, and how they're deployed. Then Webb already knows the security layout." "Yes. And the 48 hours I negotiated for your recovery is a window. Not for you, for them. They know you won't move me for 48 hours. which means they know exactly how long they have to plan their next move. Sarah grabbed the chair and dragged it to the door. She opened it and looked at the two guards. Young men, competent faces. But she didn't know them, didn't know their backgrounds, didn't know if one of them had a phone in his pocket relaying their position to someone who wanted the Admiral dead. "Where is Commander Cole right now?" she asked. "Third floor command post, ma'am. Conference room B." Sarah turned back to Harding. His eyes were closing. The conversation had drained what little energy he'd recovered. But before he slipped back under, he said one more thing. "Colby, the evidence, my investigation files. I didn't bring them to Boston. Where are they? Sent them to someone I trust. Before I left Washington, a dead drop. If something happened to me, they'd know what to do." His voice was barely audible now. "But I need to be alive to activate the drop. My biometric signature, fingerprint and voice authentication. If I die, the evidence stays locked forever. That's why they need to kill me, not just to silence me, to bury everything." His eyes closed. His grip on her forearm relaxed. The monitors beeped on, steady and indifferent. Sarah stood over him, her mind on fire. Everything had just gotten worse. The Admiral wasn't just a witness. He was a living key, the only person who could unlock the evidence that would bring down Trident Solutions. If he died, the truth died with him. Every soldier who'd been killed by defective equipment, every family that had never learned how their child really died, all of it would be buried forever. And someone inside Cole's own command was helping the enemy. She left the room at a near run and found Cole in conference room B. He was bent over a laptop, a phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when she entered and immediately read the urgency on her face. "What happened?" "The Admiral woke up. He talked to me." Sarah closed the door behind her. "Commander, we have a problem, a big one. The patient should be resting, not debriefing you." "He didn't debrief me, he warned me." She stood across the table from him. "There's a mole inside Warcom, someone high level, someone with access to your intelligence channels." Cole's face went very still. "He told you that?" "He told me that the person who leaked his location to Trident has access to classified operations, personnel files, and intelligence briefings, which means they have access to everything you've been doing since you arrived in Boston. Your security deployment, your communications, the position of every operative in this building." Cole set down his phone slowly. If that's true, then your 48-hour security perimeter is worthless. Webb doesn't need to break in. He just needs to wait until your mole tells him exactly where the gaps are. Cole stood. He walked to the window and stood there for a long moment, his back to her. When he turned around, his face had changed. The confident intelligence officer was gone. In his place was something rawer. A man confronting the possibility that his own people had been compromised. "I vetted my team personally," he said. "The Admiral said you're clean. He trusts you. But your team was assembled through Warcom channels. If the mole has access to those channels, then he knows my roster." Cole finished the sentence like a man swallowing glass. "He knows who I brought. He knows their positions. He knows our communication protocols." "Yes." Cole picked up his phone again. Then he put it back down. He stared at it the way a man stares at a weapon that might be pointed at him. "If the mole is monitoring our communications, I can't use standard channels to reorganize. I can't call in replacement personnel without the request going through Warcom systems. I can't even report this without alerting the person we're trying to catch." "Which means we're on our own," Sarah said. "You, me, and whatever members of your team you can personally verify are clean. Against a professional assassin with inside intelligence on our every move." 6 to 12 a.m., Wednesday morning. 24 hours since Sarah had clipped her nurse's badge to her scrubs and walked into St. Catherine's for what she thought would be another invisible day. Cole spent the next 3 hours silently evaluating his team. He didn't change their positions. He didn't alter the security deployment. Any sudden changes would signal to the mole that they'd been discovered. Instead, he identified 4 operatives he'd served with personally for more than 5 years. Men he'd trust with his life because he'd already trusted them with his life, in places whose names were still classified. Those 4 he briefed privately, one by one, face to face, no phones, no radios. Sarah stayed at Harding's bedside. Graves came at 7 a.m. with the oncology panel results, and the look on his face told her everything before he opened his mouth. AFP is elevated. CT shows a mass on the right lobe of the liver, 3 centimeters. He handed her the tablet with the imaging. It's consistent with hepatocellular carcinoma, early to mid-stage. Operable, but only if he survives the next few weeks. Does he know? I'd bet my career he already knows. A man like that doesn't ignore symptoms. He probably got the diagnosis months ago and decided he had more important things to do than start chemotherapy. Sarah looked at the Admiral's sleeping face. 3 bullets, a traitor inside his own command, and cancer eating him from the inside. Any one of those would have broken most people. James Harding was fighting all 3 at once, and his only concern was making sure the truth survived, even if he didn't. Richard, I need you to do something for me. I need you to set up a secondary blood supply for the Admiral. Not through the hospital blood bank, through a private source. Can you do that? Graves frowned. Why? Because if there's a mole inside military intelligence, there could be someone inside this hospital too. Anyone Trident has gotten to. I don't want the Admiral's IV lines, his blood supply, or his medications going through any channel that could be tampered with. Graves stared at her. You think someone might try to poison him? I think someone already tried to kill him with bullets. Poison is quieter. My God! Graves ran his hand over his face. All right, I have a contact at Massachusetts General, a blood bank director I trust. I can arrange a private supply outside of St. Catherine's system. Do it. And Richard, don't tell anyone. Not Marsh, not the nurses, not the lab techs. Only you, and I handle his medications, and IV changes from this point forward. Understood. Graves turned to leave, then stopped. Sarah, you know you can't sustain this. You've been awake for over 24 hours. You can't guard him, treat him, and investigate a conspiracy on no sleep. Watch me. He shook his head but said nothing more. He left. At 9:45 a.m., Sarah's worst fear materialized. She was checking the Admiral's chest tube output when Lou burst into the room, breathless, his face white. Sarah, the security team just caught someone on the 4th floor. A man in hospital scrubs with a fake staff ID. He was heading toward the stairwell that leads directly to this corridor. Sarah was on her feet instantly. Where is he now? Cole's men have him in the basement. They're questioning him. Sarah looked at the Admiral. Stable, monitors steady, guards at the door. Stay here, she told Lou. Do not leave this room. Do not let anyone in except me or Dr. Graves. Anyone else, I don't care if they're wearing a doctor's coat or a general's stars. You do not open that door. Lou nodded. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were firm. I won't move. Sarah ran. She found Cole in the basement maintenance room. 2 of his trusted operatives flanked a man sitting in a metal chair. The man was mid-30s, muscular build, close-cropped hair. He was wearing St. Catherine's scrubs and a hospital ID badge that read, T. Morrison, Radiology. The real T. Morrison, Sarah would later learn, had called in sick that morning. Someone had known he wouldn't be there. Cole was standing over the man, his face carved from stone. He was carrying this. He held up a small case. Inside it was a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Sarah took the case. She held the syringe up to the light. This isn't a hospital medication. There's no label, no dosage marking. She looked at the man in the chair. What is this? The man said nothing. His eyes were flat, dead. The eyes of someone trained to resist interrogation. Potassium chloride, Cole said quietly. In a high enough dose, injected directly into an IV line, it causes cardiac arrest. Looks like a natural post-surgical complication. Untraceable unless someone orders a specific toxicology screen. Sarah's hands trembled. For the first time all day, her hands trembled. Not from fear, from rage. They'd sent someone to murder a wounded man in his hospital bed with a needle. Quietly, cleanly, the way you put down an animal. "He's not Webb," she said, studying the man's face. "Webb is former Special Forces. This man is hired help, disposable." Agreed, which means Webb is still out there. And this was a test run. A test run to probe our security, to see how we respond, to identify our weak points. Cole looked at her. "They're not done, Lieutenant Commander. This was just the first move." Sarah handed the syringe back to Cole. She turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" Cole asked. "Back to the Admiral's room. I'm not leaving his side again." She was halfway to the elevator when her borrowed phone, a clean device Cole's team had provided, buzzed with a text from Graves. "Check the Admiral's original admission blood work. Sample ID 4471. Something's wrong. The blood type doesn't match." Sarah stopped walking. She read the message again. The blood type doesn't match. The Admiral's dog tag said O positive. If the admission blood work showed a different type, it meant one of two things. Either the dog tags were wrong, which was essentially impossible for a military officer, or someone had tampered with his blood sample after it was drawn. If the hospital was using tampered blood work to guide his treatment, wrong blood type for transfusions, wrong baseline for medication dosing, they could kill him without ever stepping foot in his room. Sarah broke into a run. The elevator was too slow. She took the stairs, two at a time, her boots hammering against the concrete. She burst onto the third floor. Lou was standing outside the Admiral's room, exactly where she'd left him. Inside, the monitors beeped steadily. Harding was alive, stable, for now. Sarah grabbed the bedside terminal and pulled up the admission labs. Sample ID 4471. Blood type result, a positive. The dog tag said O positive. The lab said A positive. Someone had switched the sample. And if the blood bank was using the lab result to prepare transfusion units, the next time the Admiral needed blood, which could be any moment given his condition, they would give him the wrong type. A transfusion reaction in a post-surgical patient with his level of damage would be fatal within minutes. And it would look like a tragic medical error, an accident, the kind of mistake that happens in busy hospitals. No one would ever suspect it was murder. Sarah picked up the phone and called Graves. He answered on the first ring. "Richard, pull every blood unit the hospital has prepared for our patient. All of them. Do it right now. Do not let anyone transfuse anything until I personally verify the type." Already on it, I flagged the discrepancy 20 minutes ago and quarantined the units. "Sarah, someone in the lab changed that result." I checked the system log. The original entry was O positive. It was modified at 3:47 a.m. to a positive. The modification was made using a lab technician's login credentials. "Which technician?" "Thomas Brennan, night shift. I tried to find him." Graves paused. "He left the hospital at 4 a.m., 2 hours before his shift ended. Nobody's seen him since." Sarah closed her eyes. The net was tightening. Not around Trident, around the Admiral. They had people everywhere. The fake orderly with the syringe, the lab technician who changed the blood work, the anonymous text to her phone. Layer upon layer of attack, each one designed to look like something else. And somewhere behind all of it, Marcus Webb was watching, waiting, learning from each failed attempt, adjusting. "Richard, that private blood supply you were arranging, I need it here within the hour. O positive, verified by your contact personally. I don't trust a single unit in this hospital system." "I'll make the call." Sarah hung up. She walked back to the Admiral's bedside and stood over him. His face was peaceful in sleep, the lines of pain softened by sedation. He looked older than his 58 years. The war and the cancer and the weight of what he carried had aged him in ways that medals and commissions couldn't measure. She thought about Corporal Michael Davis from Beaumont, Texas. 22 years old, his mother still writing Christmas letters to a dead son's unit, never knowing the truth. She thought about Specialist Reeves. Sergeant First Class Amy Okafor, names carved into her memory like names on a wall. She thought about the night in Syria when a Trident-affiliated officer handed her a form and told her to write "enemy combatant fire" as the cause of death for 3 soldiers killed by equipment that Trident manufactured and the Pentagon approved. She'd said no. She'd written the truth, and they'd erased her for it. Now she was the only thing standing between a dying admiral and the people who needed him dead. No reinforcements she could fully trust. No system that hadn't been compromised. No guarantee that the next attack wouldn't come from a direction she couldn't predict. She sat down in her chair. She placed her hand on the admiral's arm, and she waited for whatever was coming next. The private blood supply arrived at 11:20 a.m. Wednesday. Graves carried it himself, 2 coolers of O-positive units verified by his contact at Massachusetts General, a woman he'd trained with at Johns Hopkins 20 years ago and trusted the way soldiers trust the person covering their flank. Sarah checked each unit personally, labels, seal integrity, cross-matching with a portable testing kit Cole's team had brought from the Suburban. Everything matched. Everything was clean. She replaced every IV bag connected to the Admiral with supplies from the private stock. She relabeled the drip medications herself. She verified every dosage, every concentration, every expiration date. When she was done, she sealed the room's medication cabinet with a tamper-evident strip and wrote the time across it in marker. 11:52 a.m. Nothing goes in or out of this cabinet without my knowledge. Lou watched her work from the corner of the room. He hadn't left the Admiral's side since she told him to stay. 14 hours in a chair. No food, no sleep. His scrubs were wrinkled and his eyes were bloodshot, but he was still there. "You don't have to stay, Kevin," Sarah said. "Yeah, I do." He rubbed his face with both hands. "When they brought this man in yesterday morning, I was making jokes about you, laughing about how you'd probably faint. And then I watched you save his life with your bare hands, while the rest of us stood there like idiots." He looked at her. "I'm not leaving." Sarah nodded. She didn't have the energy for gratitude or for the conversation that would have followed it. She handed him a protein bar from her jacket pocket. "Eat. That's an order." He almost smiled. "You sound like my drill sergeant." "You had a drill sergeant?" "ROTC. 2 years at Boston College before I switched to pre-med." He unwrapped the bar. "Worst 2 years of my life. Best 2 years of my life. I quit because I thought I wasn't tough enough." "You've been sitting in that chair for 14 hours guarding a man you've never met. I'd say you're tough enough." At 12:30 p.m., Cole came in with new information. His face was grim, which Sarah was beginning to understand was his default expression. But there was something else underneath it now, something that looked like barely controlled fury. "The man we caught in the basement," Cole said, "he talked. I thought he was trained to resist interrogation." "He was trained. He wasn't committed. There's a difference. Committed men die before they talk. This one was a contractor, hired muscle, paid $50,000 to walk into a hospital and inject a patient. He didn't even know who the patient was. Who hired him? He was contacted through a series of encrypted messages, dead-end digital trail. But he gave us one useful piece of information." Cole paused. "He was told to enter through the East Service entrance at exactly 3:15 a.m. He was told the security camera on that entrance would be offline for 90 seconds. He was told which stairwell to use and which corridor would be clear." Sarah felt the cold certainty settle deeper. "Someone on your team gave him that information. Someone on my team gave him a precise, Timed window through my security perimeter, which means I have a traitor standing guard in this hospital right now, and I don't know which one. How many men do you have total? 16, plus my 4 verified assets. So 12 unknowns. 12 men, any one of whom could be feeding our positions to Trident in real time. Cole's jaw worked. I've been running intelligence operations for 11 years, Lieutenant Commander. I've never had my own team compromised. This is... He stopped himself, swallowed whatever word was coming. I need to identify the mole without alerting them. If they know we're looking, they go dark. Or worse, they accelerate the timeline. Sarah thought for a moment. The battlefield surgeon in her was used to solving problems under pressure, used to making decisions with incomplete information when every second mattered. Feed them different information. Explain. Give each of your 12 unknowns a slightly different version of the security plan. Different patrol routes, different shift change times. Small variations, nothing obvious enough to raise suspicion. Then watch which version leaks. Cole stared at her. That's a counterintelligence technique. I spent 8 years in military hospitals. You think intelligence officers never pass through my operating rooms? You hear things. You learn things. How long? 12 hours. Give each man his modified orders at the next shift rotation. If the mole passes information to Webb or Trident, we'll know which version leaked, and we'll know who sent it. 12 hours is a long time. I keep hearing that, and the Admiral keeps staying alive. Give me 12 hours, Commander. Cole left to implement the plan. Sarah turned back to Harding. His eyes were open again, watching her with a clarity that surprised her. That was smart, he said. His voice was stronger than last night. But I'm alive, which I'm told is largely your doing. It's entirely your stubbornness. I just provided technical support. I also heard what Graves said about my blood work. His eyes held hers. No evasion, no pretense. The liver. I know about it, Colby. I was diagnosed 4 months ago. 4 months, and you didn't start treatment. I had something more important to do. More important than staying alive? Yes. No hesitation, no drama. Just the flat, immovable conviction of a man who'd weighed his own life against something larger and made his choice. Trident has killed American soldiers for profit and gotten away with it for years. They have protection at the highest levels of the Pentagon. They have a mole inside my own command structure. The evidence I've gathered is the only thing that can bring them down. And your testimony is the key that holds it all together. My testimony? Your report from Syria, the autopsies you performed, the equipment analysis, the photographs. Harding pushed himself up slightly on the pillows, grimacing with the effort. I found your original documentation buried in a classified archive 6 months ago. Someone had tried to delete it, but you filed redundant copies through 3 separate channels. Smart. I learned early to make copies of everything when powerful people wanted things to disappear. Your documentation proves a direct causal link between Trident's defective equipment and the deaths of American service members. Combined with my investigation, financial records, internal communications, testimony from Trident employees, it's enough to bring federal charges against Trident's CEO, 3 Pentagon procurement officials, and the Warcom officer who's been protecting them. You know who the mole is. I know who the mole is. Sarah's breath caught. Who? Captain Raymond Voss, Deputy Director of Warcom Intelligence, Cole's direct superior. The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She knew that name. Every officer in Naval Special Warfare knew that name. Raymond Voss was a decorated veteran, a 30-year Navy man, a member of the inner circle that controlled the most sensitive special operations in the country. He'd briefed presidents. He'd testified before Congress. He was untouchable. Voss authorized my discharge, Sarah said slowly. The pieces were clicking together now. 2 years of confusion resolving into a picture that was terrifyingly clear. He signed the order. I never understood why a captain in Warcom intelligence would personally involve himself in the administrative discharge of a field surgeon. It didn't make sense. It makes perfect sense when you understand that Voss has been receiving payments from Trident Solutions for 7 years. Your report threatened to expose the equipment failures. If those deaths were investigated, the trail would lead to Trident, and from Trident, it would lead to Voss. You were a loose thread, Colby. He pulled you out before you could unravel everything. And now he's trying to kill you for the same reason. He's not trying to kill me. He's trying to destroy the evidence. I'm just the lock that keeps it sealed. Harding sank back against the pillows. The effort of speaking was draining him visibly. The dead drop I set up in Washington requires my biometric authentication, fingerprint, and voice. If I die before I activate it, the evidence remains locked. Voss knows this. Every attempt on my life isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring that evidence never sees daylight. Sarah was pacing now. Her mind was operating the way it did in combat, fast, clear, ruthless in its logic. We need to activate the dead drop, now, before they find another way to get to you. I need to be physically present at the drop location. It's a secure facility in Arlington. Biometric systems can't be operated remotely. You can't travel to Arlington. You're 48 hours post-op with a chest tube and a liver mass. Then we have a problem. No, Sarah stopped pacing. We bring the authentication to you. The system is hardwired. It can't be moved. Can it be replicated? If we had the specifications, could Cole's people build a portable biometric reader that interfaces with the same system? Harding looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Theoretically, the system was designed by a Navy cryptographer named Lieutenant Angela Reyes. She built the dead drop for me. She's the only person who knows its full specifications. Where is she? Naval Station Norfolk. But Colby, if Voss is monitoring Warcom communications, any attempt to contact Reyes through official channels will be flagged immediately. Then we don't use official channels. Sarah found Cole in the corridor. She pulled him into an empty room and closed the door. I need you to get someone to Norfolk without using any military communication system. No phones, no radios, no email, nothing that goes through Warcom. Who? Lieutenant Angela Reyes, Navy cryptographer. She designed the Admiral's evidence storage system. We need her here in Boston with everything she needs to build a portable authentication device. How am I supposed to contact her without communications? Send one of your 4 verified men, in person. Drive to Norfolk. Find her. Bring her back. No digital footprint. That's a 9-hour drive each way. Then he'd better leave now. Cole rubbed his temples. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 2 days, which was exactly what he was. Sarah, I need to tell you something. I ran the canary trap. Modified security plans distributed to all 12 unknowns at the 1 p.m. shift change. I didn't expect results this fast. You got a hit. Within 40 minutes, one of the 12 forwarded his specific patrol route to an external number via text. He thought he was being discreet. My tech team caught it. Who? Petty Officer, First Class Brian Holt. 6 years in naval intelligence. Clean record. Spotless evaluations. No red flags in his file whatsoever. Voss recruited him. Probably years ago. Sleeper asset. Activated only when needed. Cole's voice was tight with anger. Holt has been standing guard on the 2nd floor, 30 feet from the stairwell that leads directly to the Admiral's recovery room. Have you pulled him? No. If I pull him, Voss knows we've identified the leak. Right now, Holt is more valuable to us in place. We feed him controlled information. We let him think he's still operating undetected. And we use him to send Trident exactly what we want them to believe. Sarah saw it immediately. We use Holt to set a trap. Exactly. 3:45 p.m. Wednesday. Sarah hadn't slept in 34 hours. Her body was running on coffee, adrenaline, and a reservoir of endurance that 8 years of combat medicine had built into her nervous system. She knew she was approaching the limit. She knew that human performance degraded sharply after 36 hours without sleep, that judgment errors increased, that reaction time slowed. She also knew that soldiers in combat regularly operated for 72 hours or more. She'd done it herself, in Mosul, during the worst week of her deployment. She could do it again. She was checking the Admiral's chest tube output when Graves appeared at the door. His face told her something was wrong before he spoke. "We have a complication," he said, stepping inside and lowering his voice. "The CT results from this morning. I had the oncology team review them. And the liver mass isn't the only finding. There's a secondary lesion on the right adrenal gland. Small, but it's there." He handed her the tablet. "Sarah, if this has metastasized, his surgical recovery timeline changes dramatically. His immune response is compromised. Infection risk goes through the roof, and his coagulation factors are already borderline." Sarah studied the images. The adrenal lesion was tiny, barely visible on the scan, but it was there. And Graves was right. If the cancer had spread beyond the liver, everything she was doing to keep the Admiral alive in the short term was buying time against a longer war that they might not win. "Does he know?" she asked. "I haven't told him. I thought you should." "Not yet. Not until we've secured the evidence. He needs to stay focused. If he thinks his timeline has shortened, he might try to do something reckless. He's a Navy SEAL admiral. Reckless is in his job description. Which is exactly why I'm not telling him yet." At 6 p.m., Cole briefed Sarah on the trap. Using Holt as an unwitting channel, they'd fed Trident a piece of false information. The Admiral would be moved from St. Catherine's to a military facility at midnight Thursday. The transfer would use the hospital's underground service tunnel, which connected to a loading dock on the building's north side. If Trident took the bait, Webb would position himself at or near the loading dock to intercept the transfer. Cole's verified operatives would be waiting. "There's a risk," Cole said. "If Webb is as good as his file suggests, he'll scout the location before committing. If he smells a trap, he'll abort, and we lose our only chance to catch him." "Then the trap has to be perfect," Sarah said. "It has to look real, which means we need an actual medical transport vehicle at the loading dock, actual hospital staff performing transfer protocols, and someone on a stretcher who looks enough like a patient to pass a visual check from a distance. I'll handle the vehicle and the staff, but I need someone medical to make the transfer look authentic. I'll do it. I'll be with the stretcher. If Webb is watching through a scope, he needs to see a doctor performing genuine medical procedures. That's me." Cole shook his head. "Absolutely not. If Webb opens fire, you're directly in the line of—" "Commander, I've been in the line of fire more times than I can count. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you how to make this work." They stared at each other across the table. Two officers, two different branches of stubbornness, forged in the same military furnace. "If anything goes wrong," Cole said slowly, "I can't guarantee your safety. I've never had a guarantee of safety in my life. It hasn't stopped me yet." 9 p.m., Wednesday. Sarah returned to the Admiral's room. Lou had finally fallen asleep in the corner chair, his chin on his chest, his breathing deep and even. She didn't wake him. He'd earned the rest. Harding was awake. His color was better. His vital signs had improved steadily throughout the day. The chest tube output had decreased to the point where she could consider removing it in the morning. His body was healing with the ferocious resilience of a man who had spent decades demanding the impossible from his physical form. "Colby, sit down. You look worse than I do." "That's saying something, Admiral." She sat. Every muscle in her body ached with exhaustion. "We're setting a trap for Webb. Tomorrow midnight. Cole is running the operation. And you?" "I'll be at the loading dock with a decoy stretcher, making it look real." Harding was quiet for a moment. His eyes studied her face the way he'd studied 1,000 operational briefings. looking for the weakness, the flaw, the thing that could go wrong. You know what Trident will do if they realize it's a trap? Yes. They won't just send Webb. If they suspect a setup, they'll send everyone. Webb plus whatever assets Voss can activate. They'll try to breach the hospital itself while we're focused on the loading dock. I know. And you're still going. Admiral, I walked away from the Navy 2 years ago. I told myself I was done fighting, done putting my life on the line for a system that threw me away the moment I became inconvenient. She met his eyes. But I was wrong. I didn't walk away from the fight. The fight walked away from me. And now it's back. And the 3 soldiers I lost in Syria, Davis, Reeves, Okafor, they deserve someone who will finish this. Harding reached out and took her hand. Not a commander's grip, not a warrior's grip. The grip of a man who understood exactly what it cost to carry the names of the dead. When Angela Reyes gets here with the authentication system, he said, I'm going to unlock that evidence. And then you and I are going to burn Trident Solutions to the ground. Yes, sir, we are. At 10:15 p.m., Cole's operative reported in from the road. He was 4 hours from Norfolk. Estimated arrival at Reyes's location by 2 a.m. Thursday. Return trip to Boston by noon, accounting for the time needed to brief Reyes and collect her equipment. Noon, Thursday. The trap at the loading dock was set for midnight Thursday. That gave them 12 hours between Reyes's arrival and the operation. 20 hours to build the portable authentication device, activate the dead drop, secure the evidence, and spring the trap on Webb. 12 hours. It was enough. It had to be enough. Sarah checked the Admiral's vitals one final time. She adjusted his IV drip. She verified the tamper seal on the medication cabinet. She looked at Lou, still sleeping in the corner, and at the 2 guards standing rigid outside the door. Then she closed her eyes. Not to sleep. She couldn't afford sleep. But she could rest the way Harding had taught her his SEALs rested. Eyes closed, body still, mind alert. Conserving energy for the moment when everything would depend on how fast she could move and how clearly she could think. Tomorrow night, one way or another, this would end. Either Trident would fall, or Sarah Colby would become the 4th name on her list of people she couldn't save. She breathed in, she breathed out, and she waited for Thursday. Thursday, 12:17 p.m. Lieutenant Angela Reyes walked into the Admiral's recovery room carrying a black, hard case and the look of a woman who'd been driven 9 hours through the night with no explanation and was ready to demand one. She was 34, compact, sharp-eyed, with the focused intensity of someone who spent her career building systems that governments depended on and enemies feared. She stopped 2 steps inside the door, saw Harding in the bed, and her composure cracked. Admiral, her voice broke on the word. They told me you were injured. They didn't tell me how bad. I've looked worse, Lieutenant. Harding managed something close to a smile. I once took a piece of shrapnel the size of a deck of cards out of my left leg with a Leatherman and a bottle of Jack Daniels. This is a vacation by comparison. That is not reassuring, sir. It wasn't meant to be. Have you met Lieutenant Commander Colby? Reyes turned to Sarah. The 2 women sized each other up in the way that military women do, quickly, thoroughly, without the politics. Reyes extended her hand. The Admiral has spoken about you. He said you were the best battlefield surgeon he'd ever seen operate. He was unconscious for most of my operating, Sarah said, but I appreciate the compliment. Can you build it? Reyes didn't need clarification. She set the hard case on the bedside table and opened it. Inside were components, circuit boards, biometric scanners, encrypted drives, wiring harnesses, each one nestled in custom-cut foam. I designed the original system. I can build a portable version, but I need 3 things: power supply, a secure network connection, and absolute certainty that nobody in this building is monitoring our electronic emissions. Cole's team has swept the floor twice, Sarah said, and I'll get you whatever power setup you need. How long? Harding asked. Reyes was already assembling components, her hands moving with the same kind of practiced precision that Sarah's showed in surgery. 4 hours, maybe 5. The biometric interface has to match the original specifications exactly, or the dead drop won't authenticate. There's zero margin for error. You have until 6 p.m., Sarah said. We need the evidence unlocked before midnight. Reyes looked up. Why midnight? Because at midnight, we're ending this. Reyes worked. Sarah stood guard. Cole rotated his 4 trusted operatives in shifts outside the door, while his 12 unknowns, including Holt, the identified mole, continued their standard patrols, oblivious to the fact that every piece of information they received was carefully fabricated. At 2:30 p.m., Graves came in with updated lab results. He pulled Sarah aside and spoke in a whisper. The coagulation panel is trending down. His platelet count dropped 15% since this morning. The cancer is accelerating the consumption. Can he tolerate stress? Physical stress, emotional stress, the kind that would come from activating a high-security biometric system? Medically, I'd advise against it. But you're not asking me as a doctor. You're asking me as someone who understands what's at stake. Yes, Graves looked at Harding, who was watching Reyes build the device with the patient attention of a man observing a weapons system being assembled for a mission he intended to lead. He'll do it regardless of what either of us says. So the question isn't whether he can tolerate it. The question is whether we can keep him alive through it. That's been the question since Tuesday morning, Richard. Then my answer hasn't changed. I'll be here, whatever he needs. 4:40 p.m. Reyes set down her tools. The device sat on the bedside table, a matte black unit roughly the size of a laptop, with a fingerprint scanner on top and a small microphone attached to one side. A single green LED pulsed on the front panel. It's ready, Reyes said. Her voice carried the quiet satisfaction of an engineer who just built something impossible under impossible conditions. The system will connect to the dead drop server through an encrypted satellite uplink. No terrestrial networks, nothing that can be intercepted or traced through Warcom channels. Admiral, when you authenticate, the evidence files will be transmitted directly to 3 pre-designated recipients. Who are the recipients? Sarah asked. Harding answered. The chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, and a journalist at the Washington Post who I've worked with before. Someone who can't be bought, threatened, or silenced. 3 channels, Sarah said. So even if Trident intercepts one, the other 2 still receive the full package. Redundancy, Colby. You taught me that. You filed your Syria report through 3 separate channels. I learned from the best. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest. 2 years ago, she'd filed that report believing it would be enough, believing the system would work. It hadn't. They'd buried her. But the Admiral had found it. He'd built on it. And now, in a hospital room in Boston, the system she'd trusted and the man who'd rebuilt it were about to get a second chance. Whenever you're ready, Admiral, Reyes said. Harding looked at Sarah, not at Cole, who was standing by the door, not at Reyes, who'd built the machine, not at Graves, who was monitoring his vitals. He looked at Sarah. This is for Davis, he said, and Reeves, and Okafor, and every soldier Trident killed for profit. Yes, sir. Harding placed his right index finger on the scanner. The device hummed. A blue light pulsed, reading the print, comparing it against the stored biometric profile. 3 seconds. 5. The light turned green. Fingerprint authenticated, Reyes said. Voice verification next. Admiral, speak your passphrase. Harding drew a breath. It cost him. Sarah could see the pain ripple across his face as his damaged chest expanded. But his voice, when it came, was clear and steady and carried the full weight of 30 years of command. The only easy day was yesterday, the old SEAL motto. Sarah felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. The device processed the voice. 2 seconds. 3. The green LED changed to solid white. Authentication complete, Reyes said. Files transmitting. Estimated transfer time, 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Sarah watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 8 minutes, and the evidence that Trident Solutions had killed American soldiers through criminal negligence would be in the hands of people who could act on it. 8 minutes, and the 2-year cover-up would be over. 8 minutes, and the names of the dead would finally mean something. At the 6-minute mark, Cole's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face went white. We have a problem. Holt just sent a burst transmission. Not a text this time. An encrypted data packet. My tech team is trying to decode it, but the destination is a commercial server registered to a shell company in Arlington, Virginia. Trident, Sarah said. Holt must have detected the satellite uplink. The encrypted signal would be invisible to standard monitoring, but if Trident gave him specialized detection equipment, they know we're transmitting. They know something is happening. They may not know what. Sarah looked at the progress bar. 7 minutes elapsed. 1 minute remaining. Cole, if Trident realizes we're activating the dead drop, they'll accelerate everything. Forget the midnight trap. They'll hit us now. 45 seconds. The progress bar inched forward. Cole was on his phone, barking orders to his 4 verified operatives. All units, defensive positions, secure the 3rd floor, lock the stairwells. Nobody approaches this corridor. 30 seconds. Graves moved to the Admiral's bedside, checking monitors, preparing for the worst. Lou was on his feet, wide awake, his exhaustion burned away by the electricity of imminent danger. 15 seconds. The lights in the corridor flickered. Once, twice. Someone's cutting power to this floor, Reyes said, her voice tight. Backup generators will kick in, Graves said, if they haven't been tampered with. 5 seconds. The progress bar hit 100%. The white LED turned solid green. A confirmation code appeared on the screen. Transfer complete, Reyes said. All 3 recipients confirmed. The evidence is out. Sarah exhaled. For 1 single second, she allowed herself to feel it. The relief, the vindication, the knowledge that everything she'd sacrificed, everything the Admiral had risked, had not been for nothing. The truth was free. It couldn't be buried again. Then the lights went out, completely. Emergency lighting kicked in 3 seconds later. Dim, red backup strips along the corridor floor. But the main power was gone. Monitors switched to battery. The ventilation system fell silent. And in that silence, Sarah heard something that turned her blood to ice. Gunshots. 2 floors down. Sharp, controlled, the disciplined fire of a trained operator engaging targets with precision. Contact on the 1st floor, Cole's radio crackled. Multiple hostiles entering through the east service entrance. We have men down. Webb wasn't waiting for midnight. He was here now. Cole drew his sidearm. Reyes, destroy that device. Wipe everything. Colby, stay with the Admiral. Do not leave this room. Commander, that is not a request, Lieutenant Commander. You are the Admiral's surgeon, and you are a material witness. If Webb gets to either of you, everything we just accomplished means nothing. Stay here. Protect the patient. That's your mission. He was gone. The door closed behind him. The sounds of gunfire grew louder, closer. Sarah turned to the room. Harding, Graves, Lou, Reyes. 4 people and a wounded Admiral in a darkened hospital room while a professional killer fought his way toward them. Richard, disconnect the Admiral from the wall monitors. Switch everything to portable battery units. If we lose backup power, I need him on independent systems. Graves moved instantly. No hesitation, no questions. The surgeon who'd mocked her 4 days ago was now following her orders without a flicker of doubt. Liu, barricade that door. Use whatever you can find. That door is the only way in. It doesn't open for anyone. Liu grabbed the heaviest equipment he could move and stacked it against the door. His hands were shaking. His jaw was set. Reyes, is the device wiped? Wiped and physically destroyed. Reyes held up a circuit board she'd snapped in half. Even if they get it, there's nothing left to recover. More gunfire. Closer now. Second floor. Sarah's phone buzzed. Cole's number. She answered. Colby, listen to me. Webb brought a team. 6 men, military-grade weapons and equipment. My men are engaging, but we're outnumbered on the lower floors. I'm pulling everyone to the 3rd floor to create a defensive line, but I can't guarantee they won't breach. How long until outside support arrives? I've contacted Boston PD and FBI, 15 minutes for police, 30 for a federal tactical team. 30 minutes. Can you hold? Sarah looked at the barricaded door, at Graves, steady-handed, monitoring the Admiral, at Liu, terrified but standing his ground, at Reyes, clutching the remains of her destroyed device. We'll hold. She hung up. The gunfire was on the 3rd floor now. She could hear Cole's men engaging in the corridor, the sharp crack of pistols answered by the heavier thud of automatic weapons. Webb's team had superior firepower. Cole's men had position and training. It was a brutal equation. 7 minutes passed. The firing intensified. Then a sound Sarah recognized. An explosion. A breaching charge. Someone had just blown through a door. They're through the east stairwell, a voice shouted outside. Hold the line! Hold the line! More shots. A cry of pain. The sound of a body hitting the floor. Then silence. Sarah pressed her ear to the door. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. The careful, methodical approach of someone who had cleared rooms before, who knew exactly how to move through a hostile environment. A voice, calm and conversational, carried through the door. Lieutenant Commander Colby, my name is Marcus Webb. I know you're in there. I know the Admiral is in there. And I know that the evidence has already been transmitted. Sarah said nothing. Behind her, she heard Graves's sharp intake of breath. I'm not here to negotiate, Webb continued. His voice was closer now, just outside the door. The evidence is out. I understand that. My employer understands that. The mission has changed. What's the new mission? Sarah called through the door. She needed him talking, needed to know where exactly he was standing, needed time. Captain Voss wants the Admiral dead, not to suppress evidence anymore. That ship has sailed. He wants it because James Harding can testify. Documents can be disputed. Digital files can be questioned. But a decorated vice admiral sitting in front of a Senate committee, naming names, describing operations, connecting every dot, that cannot be discredited. Voss needs the Admiral's voice silenced. Permanently. Sarah felt rage boiling up from somewhere deep inside her. The same rage she'd felt in Syria when they told her to lie about how 3 soldiers died. The same rage she'd carried for 2 years, buried under silence and invisibility. Webb, she said, I've been in firefights in Iraq. I've operated on soldiers while mortar rounds hit 20 meters away. I held a dying corporal's hand for 47 minutes in a helicopter while someone exactly like you was shooting at us from the ground. You do not scare me. A pause. Then Webb laughed. A genuine laugh, which was somehow worse than any threat. I know your file, Lieutenant Commander. I know exactly what you've done and what you're capable of, which is why I'm going to give you 60 seconds to open that door and step aside. After 60 seconds, I'm coming through it, and I promise you, the people standing behind you will get hurt. Sarah turned to the room. Graves met her eyes. Lou met her eyes. Reyes met her eyes. Nobody moved toward the door. Richard, Sarah whispered, how fast can you get the Admiral to the fire escape at the end of this wing? In his condition? 2 minutes, maybe 3. There's a fire escape? Every floor has one. Building code. It exits to the west parking lot. Sarah had memorized the hospital layout her first week on the job. Force of habit. A battlefield surgeon always knows her exits. The fire escape was 40 meters down the corridor. If Webb was positioned at the main door, The fire escape would be behind him, at the opposite end. Lou, when I say go, you and Graves take the Admiral through the back corridor to the fire escape. Reyes, you go with them. Do not stop for anything. What about you? Lou asked. I'm going to open the door. Sarah, no. Graves stepped forward. You can't. I'm not surrendering, Richard. I'm buying you time. Webb wants the Admiral. As long as Webb is focused on me, he's not focused on that fire escape. He'll kill you. Maybe, maybe not. But if I don't open that door, he's coming through it in 30 seconds, and he'll kill all of us. She looked at Graves, steady, clear, the way she looked before every surgery, every firefight, every impossible decision she'd made in 8 years of war. Get the Admiral out. That is the mission. Everything else is secondary. 15 seconds. Sarah, Harding's voice, weak but fierce. Don't you dare die for me. That's an order. With respect, Admiral, I don't take orders anymore. I was discharged, remember? She looked at him one last time. Besides, I haven't lost a patient yet. I'm not starting with you. 10 seconds. Go. Now. Graves and Lou disconnected the Admiral's portable monitors and lifted him from the bed. Harding stifled a groan as his damaged chest protested the movement. Reyes cleared the path to the back corridor. 5 seconds. Sarah pulled the barricade away from the door. She stood in front of it, alone. She reached for the handle. The door burst inward before she could touch it. Webb had breached. He came through fast, weapon raised, exactly the way a Special Forces operator enters a hostile room. His eyes found Sarah immediately, the gun leveled at her chest. Behind her, she heard the soft, rapid footsteps of Graves and Lou, carrying the Admiral toward the fire escape. Webb heard them too. His eyes flicked past Sarah, toward the retreating sound, and in that fraction of a second, Sarah moved. She didn't try to disarm him. She didn't try to fight him. She did what she'd been trained to do in combat survival courses. She made herself an obstacle. She stepped directly into his path, blocking the corridor, forcing him to deal with her before he could pursue. Webb shoved her. Hard. She hit the wall and felt something crack in her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. She gasped but stayed on her feet. She stepped back into his path. Move, Webb said. No. He raised his weapon, pointed it directly at her face from 2 feet away. I don't want to kill you, Colby. You're not the target. Then you've got a problem, because I'm not moving. 3 seconds passed. 5. The longest seconds of Sarah's life. She stared down the barrel of the gun and saw, in the black circle of the muzzle, every face she'd ever lost, every soldier she'd ever held while they died, every name she carried. And she was not afraid. The crash came from behind Webb. Cole and 2 operatives hit him from the corridor, tackling him to the ground with the coordinated violence of men who'd been training for exactly this moment. Webb fought, viciously, expertly, but 3 against 1 is 3 against 1, and within 10 seconds he was on the floor, disarmed, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Cole stood over him, breathing hard, blood running from a cut above his eye. He looked at Sarah. She was leaning against the wall, holding her shoulder, white-faced with pain. The Admiral? Fire escape. Graves and Lou have him. Cole nodded. He keyed his radio. All units, primary threat neutralized. Secure the building. I need a medical team on the west parking lot immediately. He looked back at Sarah. Something raw and unconcealed moved across his face. Respect, gratitude, the particular awe of a man who just watched someone stand in front of a gun with nothing but courage. He sat in zip ties with the blank, resigned expression of a professional who understood that the operation was over. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood in a windowless room in the Hart Senate office building in Washington, D.C. She wore her Navy dress uniform for the first time in over 2 years. The ribbons on her chest included the Navy Distinguished Service Medal that had been stripped from her file during her discharge and officially reinstated by order of the Secretary of the Navy. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then she told it. All of it. Syria, the 3 soldiers, the defective equipment, the order to falsify their causes of death, her refusal, her discharge, and the 2 years of exile that followed. The committee members listened in silence. Several of them had served in the military. One of them had lost a nephew in Afghanistan. When Sarah described holding Corporal Michael Davis as he died from body armor that Trident Solutions knew was defective, the senator from Texas removed his glasses and pressed his hand over his eyes. Admiral Harding testified the following day. He arrived in a wheelchair, still recovering, thinner than he'd been, the cancer fighting its own war inside him. But his voice was iron. He named names. He presented financial records. He described the 7-year relationship between Captain Raymond Voss and Trident Solutions, the payments, the cover-ups, the bodies. Voss was arrested at his home in Virginia Beach at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. He came to the door in his bathrobe. The agent said he didn't look surprised. Trident Solutions' CEO was arrested the same day. Federal prosecutors charged him with fraud, conspiracy, and involuntary manslaughter. The charges covered the deaths of 17 American service members, 17 families who would finally learn the truth. Marcus Webb cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony provided the final piece, the operational details of how Trident eliminated threats to their operation. The hits, the surveillance, the systematic destruction of anyone who got too close to the truth. 3 months after the Senate hearings, Sarah stood at the entrance of a new wing at St. Catherine's Medical Center. A brass plaque beside the door read, "The National Center for Combat Veteran Trauma Care, founded by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Colby, USN." Director Marsh had personally approved the space. She'd also personally delivered a written apology, which Sarah had accepted with a handshake and no further discussion. Some things didn't need more words. Graves was there, now serving as co-director of surgical training. He'd restructured his entire approach to trauma surgery based on what he'd learned from Sarah, and he'd begun publishing papers on the integration of battlefield trauma techniques into civilian medical practice that were being adopted by hospitals across the country. Lou had completed his residency and requested permanent assignment to the center. He told Sarah he'd found his purpose. She believed him. Reyes returned to Norfolk but maintained a secure communication channel with Sarah. Once a month, they talked. Reyes never said it directly, but Sarah understood. Angela Reyes was the kind of woman who needed to know that the system she'd built had mattered. Sarah made sure she knew. Cole was promoted to captain. He sent Sarah a one-line message on the day it was announced. "None of this happens without you standing in front of that door." Admiral James Harding began chemotherapy 3 weeks after the hearings. Sarah visited him every Sunday at Bethesda Naval Medical Center. They didn't talk about Trident or Voss or Webb. They talked about the sailors Harding had commanded, the soldiers Sarah had saved, the people they'd lost, and the people they'd kept. On a Sunday in March, Harding was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than he had in months. The oncologist had reported that the liver mass was responding to treatment. The adrenal lesion had stabilized. It wasn't a cure, but it was time. More time than anyone had expected. "Colby," he said, "I need to tell you something I should have said months ago." "Sir, when I found your report in that classified archive, when I read what you documented in Syria, I wasn't just impressed by the evidence. I was impressed by the officer who wrote it." He paused. "You had every reason to follow the order. Falsify the report, keep your head down, protect your career. Every reason in the world. And you didn't." "I couldn't." "No, you wouldn't. There's a difference. Couldn't means you had no choice. Wouldn't means you had every choice, and you chose the hard one anyway." He reached into the drawer beside his bed and pulled out a small velvet box. "This belongs to you. It always did." Sarah opened it. Inside was a bronze star medal. The citation read, "For exceptionally meritorious service in combat operations and unwavering moral courage in the face of institutional opposition. Her vision blurred. She blinked, hard. "I put you in for it the day after I read your report," Harding said. "Took me 6 months to get it through the bureaucracy. Voss tried to block it 3 times. He smiled. He failed." Sarah closed the box. She held it against her chest. She didn't trust herself to speak. "One more thing," Harding said. "Davis's mother, Mrs. Patricia Davis, from Beaumont, Texas. She's been writing letters to her son's unit every Christmas for 3 years. She wrote to me after the hearings. She said," his voice caught. He cleared his throat. "She said she finally knows what happened to her boy, and she wanted to thank the doctor who tried to save him and the officer who told the truth." Sarah closed her eyes. Michael Davis, 22 years old, Beaumont, Texas. 3 years of Christmas letters to a ghost. "She wants to meet you, Colby." "Then I'll go to Beaumont." Sarah drove to Texas on a Friday in April. She pulled up to a small white house with a flagpole in the front yard, an American flag hanging still in the warm air. Patricia Davis opened the door before Sarah reached the porch. She was 67 years old, small, with her son's eyes. She didn't say hello. She didn't say thank you. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Sarah and held on. They stood like that for a long time. 2 women who had never met, connected by a boy who died too young, and a truth that took too long to surface. Later, sitting at the kitchen table, Mrs. Davis showed Sarah photographs. Michael at 5, missing his front teeth. Michael at 17, in his high school football uniform. Michael at 21, the day he shipped out, grinning under his cover, looking invincible. "He wrote to me every week," Mrs. Davis said. "Every single week. Even when he was in places he couldn't name, he'd find a way." She touched the last photograph. Michael in uniform, standing in front of a dusty vehicle, squinting against the sun. His last letter said he felt safe. He said his equipment was good and his team was strong. Her voice broke. He trusted them. He trusted all of it. Sarah reached across the table and took the woman's hand. "He was brave, Mrs. Davis. He was one of the bravest soldiers I ever treated, and I am so sorry that the people he trusted let him down." "But you didn't." Patricia Davis looked at her with eyes that held 3 years of grief and one fierce, unshakable certainty. "You didn't let him down. You told the truth. And because of that, I know my son didn't die for nothing. I know someone fought for him, even after he was gone." Sarah drove back to Boston that night. The highway stretched out in front of her, dark and empty, the kind of road that gives you nothing to look at and everything to think about. She thought about Michael Davis, about Reeves and Okafor, about Admiral Harding in his hospital bed, fighting cancer the same way he'd fought every enemy he'd ever faced, head on, no surrender. She thought about the morning at St. Catherine's, 21 days into a life she'd built on invisibility, when a dying man on a stretcher had grabbed her wrist and called her by rank. The moment everything changed. She thought about what Graves had said to her after the surgery, what Lou had shown her by staying in that chair for 14 hours, what Cole had said about her standing in front of Webb's gun. She thought about Marsh ripping her badge off and Cole handing her commission back, fired and restored in the same morning, invisible and seen in the same hour. And she thought about what Harding had told her, the difference between couldn't and wouldn't. She'd had every reason to stay silent, every reason to remain invisible, every reason to let someone else fight this fight. She wouldn't. And because she wouldn't, because a rookie nurse in a Boston hospital refused to stand down when a man was dying and refused to step aside when a killer came through the door, 17 families knew the truth. A corrupt network was in prison, and a center that would save thousands of veteran lives stood open and waiting. Sarah Colby pulled into Boston as the sun came up. She parked at St. Catherine's. She walked through the front doors, the same doors she'd entered as a nobody, the same doors she'd been fired through, the same doors she'd walked back through in uniform. The night nurse at the reception desk looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Commander." Sarah smiled back. "Good morning, Gloria." She walked to her office. She sat down. On her desk, 2 framed photographs. On the left, her old unit in Syria, dusty faces, tired smiles, the unbreakable bond of people who'd bled together. On the right, her team at the center, Graves, Lou, the new residents, the veteran counselors, the beginning of something that would outlast all of them. 2 worlds, 1 mission, the same woman standing at the center of both. Her phone buzzed. A text from Admiral Harding. "Oncologist says the tumor is shrinking. Looks like you're stuck with me, Colby." Sarah laughed. She set the phone down. She opened the first patient file of the day. The war wasn't over. It never really is. Not for people like her. But for the first time in 2 years, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Colby knew exactly where she belonged and exactly what she was fighting for. And she would not be invisible again.